This week on Quality Digest Live, we get down to the nuts and bolts, literally, and by literally, I mean literally, of manufacturing innovation.
Plus, what does the Target data breach say about how we respond to corporate disasters? That and more when we come back.
Okay. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 7th, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richman. All right, we're going to start this week with a review of a new book from authors and lean experts Karen Martin and Mike Osterling, titled Value Stream Mapping: How to Visualize Work and Align Leadership for Organizational Transformation. And there it is right there. Now, the unique thing about this book is that although it focuses on a specific tool, it really deals much more with the core principles of continuously improving organizations. Those principles include transforming leadership thinking, defining strategies, and providing customers with the highest possible levels of service. And that last point is the most important, that the customer needs to come first. And it's a point that we've emphasized a lot, but it can never really be said too much. Understanding value streams helps leaders and team members alike visualize a multitude of inputs and outputs, but always with the perspective on the ultimate output, right? Which is delivery of goods and services to your customer. So work now is complex, and this is kind of getting into this book a little bit, what they're talking about here. We know that work is complex today, and for knowledge workers in particular, it can be really difficult to easily visualize workflows. Silos can form as work breaks down into its component parts, and few people in large organizations get the complete picture about how their work influences the broader mission of the entire enterprise. And it's here that the value stream map becomes most important. Now, of course, value stream mapping is a visual technique, and this book, again, right here, beautiful little cover, offers a number of helpful charts and graphs and, of course, maps that help you understand what this is all about. So when you get the book, be sure to check out the appendix for sanitized real-world examples of how this process has transformed companies within diverse functional work environments, such as outpatient imaging, purchasing, repair services, and software development. The point is that value stream mapping can help pretty much anyone, anywhere better understand their work and how to improve their organization. So this idea that work is so broad, this is what I really liked about this book, is you really gave you a fine understanding of this. Work today, especially knowledge work, is so broad, it's so complex, it's so hard to understand for individuals in that chain how what they're doing affects the broader purpose. And the idea of inputs and outputs is a really important thing here, because every output is somebody else's input in that stream. So to use a value stream map and to do it properly, you really begin to understand that and see that visually, and then you can hopefully improve the organization, improve that whole process.
And they give a lot of examples in there of how to construct a value stream map?
They do, how to construct a map. And again, a lot of actual maps themselves, it's sanitized, so you don't know exactly what organizations they're talking about, but you know the sectors, the work that these companies are doing, and how they've used value stream maps to improve.
So ideally, you should be able to take a look at these maps, kind of pick which one kind of makes sense for your organization.
Closest.
Maybe modify it, but ideally you would learn really how a value stream map works and construct your own.
Yeah,
that makes sense for you.
And most people just need to start with a current state map. You know, people don't often even understand the current state, and when you begin to look at that and map it as they suggest that you do here, you're going to really see a lot of interesting inputs and outputs. But again, don't forget about where your customer rests within that, because that ultimate output is one that matters most.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think that's one of the things that's been pointed out a lot, is anytime you sit down to flowchart your current state, look at your current state, you're probably doing something that has maybe never been done before, right. Hasn't been done in a long time, and just going through that process all of a sudden opens up, is a real eye-opener for, like, oh my gosh, we're doing that? That in itself is worth something, right?
Right, exactly right. So check that out. More information on the book and a link where you can order value stream mapping. Just check out the story link right below the video screen right down there. And of course, as always, links to all the pieces that Dirk and I are going to be covering on today's show are available right down there.
That's right. Well, rapid development of 3D bioprinters will spark calls to ban the technology for human and non-human use by 2016. Yikes. That was a quote from Gartner Incorporated, survey group, in regards to the rapid escalation of 3D printing capabilities in biotech. The technology of 3D bioprinting, which is the medical application of 3D printing to produce living tissue and organs, is advancing so quickly that it will spark a major ethical debate on its use by 2016, according to Gartner. At the same time, 3D printing of non-living medical devices, such as prosthetic limbs, is likely to cause an explosion in demand for the technology by 2015. The issue, and this isn't really unusual, is that technology is moving faster than the public can either A, understand it, and B, wrap their head around the implications. And when you think about the implications, keep this in mind that in August 2013, so 7 months ago, the Hangzhou Danzai University in China announced it had invented the biomaterial 3D printer Regenovo, which printed a small working kidney, an actual human organ, that lasted for 4 months. So as a society, how do we deal with the technology, right? What happens if we decide to make enhanced organs? Who has control over the production? Who ensures the quality? What happens if you get behind in the payments for your new brain?
It happened to me just last week.
Exactly.
But they gave me an extension, so I refined my brain.
Repossessed it. Okay. So 3D organs might be morally problematic. I think we can understand that. We'll see. But prosthetics seem to be a different thing, fortunately, and we have covered 3D printed prosthetics in Quality Digest several times. The acceptance is a bit different, and I think because when you think of living tissue, we just get uncomfortable with the idea that you can print living tissue and living organs. The idea that you make a synthetic leg or a synthetic hand or some sort of synthetic implant, that seems different because prosthetics have been around for hundreds of years, right? So we're comfortable with that. The acceptance is a bit different, and the uses go beyond what we think of in a developed country like the US. According to Gartner, as 3D printing technology continues to mature, its ability to build customized human anatomical parts, prosthetics, has strong appeal in medical device markets, especially, and this would make sense, in economically weak and war-torn regions. Just think about that a little bit. Think about the high demand for prosthetic and other medical devices that you might find in those kind of regions. So, according to Pete Basilier, research director at Gartner, quotes, "The overall success rates of 3D printing use cases in emerging regions will escalate for three main reasons. One, the increasing ease of access and accommodation of the technology, return on investment, and because it simplifies supply chain issues with getting medical devices to these regions. Other primary drivers are a large population base with inadequate access to health care in regions often marred by internal conflicts, wars, or terrorism." So the kind of what they're saying here is that the use of prosthetics makes a lot of sense when you have a war-torn region, and basically what they're talking about here is, you got limbs blown off, you got people who need help in ways that you can't get any other way, and the idea that you could have a 3D printer in country that could print out things that are going to help in these countries where a supply chain or that sort of stuff would be disrupted by stuff coming from Europe or the United States or whatever, it makes a lot of sense. And that is kind of why they're seeing some growth, particularly in those emerging economies.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you think about it from from a MASH unit, a mobile surgical hospital. It's like somebody had an arm blown off in a conflict or war. You can basically 3D print a prosthetic, but let's say they need an organ replaced. You can do the same thing with living tissue. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I know.
The point being, I think the major point, I know we got to go, but the major point here, I think, is that you mentioned the ethical implications of stuff always
particularly with living tissue. That's the real issue.
But it always runs ahead. The technology always runs ahead of the ethics of it. But I think we're in an age now where we've got to be thinking simultaneously about ethics along with technologies and science development. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
Gartner's saying by 2016, expect to see a lot of discussion about this. I actually think it's going to be happening sooner than that, but that's their prognostication in any case.
Fascinating stuff. All right, thanks, Dirk. And we're going to turn now to another, I think, really interesting technological article, a slightly different application for technology, but one that is no less interesting, I think, for our industry, especially for manufacturing. The piece is titled "A Bolt with a head full of data. I think that's the title of the article. It was written by Mark Schmidt of NIST's Manufacturing Extension Partnership. It appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. So again, Mark works for the MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and he's in that role, of course, well acquainted with technology and the trends at play that are within the U.S. manufacturing environment. Now, in case you're not familiar with what the MEPs do, it's a program that works state by state with small and medium-sized manufacturers to help them improve technological innovation, better work with and develop suppliers, and foster sustainability, of course, and achieve continuous improvement. So, it's a good program that really kind of rolls up their sleeves and helps these smaller organizations get the benefits of a lot of the technology that is at play out there. This story is a perfect example, I think, of this, of innovation in manufacturing, and it's really kind of fascinating when you think about it. What he's talking about is a story that he was actually forwarded to him, that he read about, the development of a so-called smart bolt, which was developed by General Motors. So you say, okay, well, what is a smart bolt? All right, it's pretty ingenious. The smart bolt is shaped like a regular old bolt. It's just a bolt that fixes things in place, but it has a hollow head. Regular length of screw, but it's got a hollow head, and inside that head is a memory chip, or an RFID tag as needed, as well as a coiled metal filament that acts as an antenna. So what does that do? The bolts are temporarily inserted into, say, like a cylinder head, okay, as it goes through that GM factory. Every process done to that part, okay, is then recorded by the smart bolt. And that data then is uploaded and stored within the factory or in the cloud, wherever it wants to be. GM could access that data from anywhere. So think about this. As the cylinder head's going through the entire factory, the bolt's in it. Now, the bolt's removed before final assembly.
Right.
But
okay.
But the bolt goes through the entire manufacturing process.
So as it's going through each step, it's being recorded
now
with the results of or whatever of that machining operation or measurement operation or whatever.
Whatever it did, and the next machine in place then can read that data as well and say, well, hey, this wasn't done properly, or this action wasn't closed out, and it can say, let's look at this piece for a minute, and it may pull it and say, yeah, it's a problem, and maybe they find that it was a problem for that particular machine all along, and they got to change that machine or change the process.
Okay.
Fascinating that they can do this. Now, there's not a lot of data. There's not a lot of availability. I think they said it was 2K. I think it's 2.
Yeah, small amount of data. In it.
But I mean, you don't need a lot of data. I mean, it's just basically just capturing what's going on in those.
So I think what it's actually capturing then is maybe steps, not necessarily measurement data or actionable, more like I was at this point, I was at this point, I was at this point. Okay,
but it also, I think there's also a process where it can check what was happening, because Mark mentions in the piece that a machine can read what happened to it, the machine before, and kick it out if there was a problem.
Okay.
Now the implications of this for quality, I think, are obviously pretty clear. The data can be analyzed to see where things went wrong in the manufacturing processes we're talking about, and if they did, those mistakes can be caught and fixed kind of in real time before that part reaches a customer. Sure. Maybe it's a whole batch of parts. Maybe it's an entire factory that has a problem. But normally in the old days, and the old days being like 18 months ago, you'd have a quality escape and maybe you'd have a major recall. Yeah. Who knows what that could be ultimately in terms of affecting customers. It could be a lot of money, it could be a lot of lives at risk, for an automobile. So this is a really great thing that helps these factories to control their process better, understand their process better, and use, what's the phrase again? Big data, right? We hear it all the time. They're using big data, and they're getting that data in real time throughout the process, storing it and being able to analyze it. Now, when we read this, both of us independently thought about the same thing. Story that you've covered, company you've talked about on the show a couple times before, Sight Machine.
Sight Machine, right.
And what they're doing now, Sight Machine's kind of tool agnostic. They can read data from all sorts of different, gather data from all sorts of different readers, but the idea is the same, that you're going to be able to, once you have the data, then begin to analyze it and figure out what's going on in your process and improve it.
And connect it to other data. Just to recap, Sight Machine is a company that collects typically test and measurement data, but it can collect any kind of data, and they collect it from everything across the entire factory, and then they look at that data to look at are there problems potentially happening upstream that are causing problems downstream? And they can do all sorts of analysis on this. But as Mike said, it's equipment and tooling and equipment agnostic, so it doesn't care what it's talking to. And this is just another tool that they put in their quiver.
That could be used. So again, what we're seeing here is continuing to push out the envelope in terms of gathering big data and then taking that next step to analyze it in close to real time, and ultimately ensuring that your customers get better product. Right. And we're seeing it time and time and time again, the innovation to use these tools and to make them work for the good of the organization, better quality. Fascinating stuff. So check that one out.
Watch this segue. This is great. So speaking of good data and for the betterment of the organization,
how about, it cuts both ways.
How about big data for the detriment of the organization? Well, watch this, okay. So several of you were probably affected by the data breach.
I know one person
huge
was.
Data breach, credit card data theft that Target experienced just before Christmas.
Well said.
Depending on the report you read, at least 40 million credit and debit cards were impacted. Target was targeted, I guess you could say. So one of those impacted was Quality Digest columnist Paul Naismith, and he writes about it in his article, Right on Target. But rather than grouse about it, in fact, Paul thinks Target actually did a pretty good job dealing with the situation after the fact. They got out in front of it. They were seemed to be pretty straightforward about what happened and how they were dealing with it. But he points out the need for a contingency plan. What do you do when corporate disaster strikes? Now, it seems like common sense that a company would do this. Big companies, little companies, but how many companies truly plan for the worst? And it's not just what steps you take to address the damage and about putting things right. It's also about how you deal with the media. The media is your conduit to your customers. Yes, that's us. Yet, I think many companies don't really build that into their plan. And a good example of that might be BP. Remember the Deepwater Horizon and the big oil spill, and BP was definitely not prepared to deal with the disaster, particularly in the way they dealt with the media. And that caused them a huge amount of harm. Here's the scary thing. The media, us, especially today, will know something is wrong before you do. That's what Twitter and Facebook and all these social media things do. And you're going to be hearing about it from your customers before you even know something's gone wrong out in the field. So your message has to be prompt and the message has to be truthful. And that's actually when I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about this. I love sharing this story because only if you are older than maybe 40,
like you,
like me, just a little older than 40, do you know the story? Or you've heard of it if you've taken any kind of press or corporate communications class. Back in 1982, 7 people died from cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. Someone, and they never caught them, opened the capsules. They went to the store. They bought a bunch of bottles of Tylenol. They opened the bottles. This was before tamper-proof lids. Put cyanide in them. Put the bottles back on the shelf in several Chicago stores. As a result, 7 people died. Johnson & Johnson found out about it from what? A reporter. Somebody called Johnson & Johnson, the CEO, I believe, and said, "So, what do you think about the guy dying of cyanide-laced Tylenol?" That was the first he heard about it. So here's what Johnson & Johnson did, and this is from the book Effective Public Relations. Johnson & Johnson chairman James Burke reacted to the negative media coverage by immediately forming a 7-member strategy team. The team's strategy guidance from Burke was first, how do we protect the people? And second, how do we save the product? Now that may sound funny, but remember from a CEO's point of view, they're both important. Number one, you got to protect people, but also you got to protect your company. How they did it is classic PR done right. The company's first actions were to immediately alert consumers across the nation via the media not to consume any type of Tylenol product, not just extra strength Tylenol, which is what was poisoned, any Tylenol product. They told consumers not to resume using the product until the extent of the tampering could be determined. Johnson & Johnson, along with stopping the production and advertising of Tylenol, withdrew all Tylenol capsules from the store shelves in Chicago and the surrounding area. After finding 2 more contaminated bottles, get this, Tylenol realized the vulnerability and ordered a nationwide withdrawal of every single capsule of Tylenol. And I love this quote come up here, if we can put this up. This is from the book. By withdrawing all Tylenol, even though there was little chance of discovering more cyanide-laced tablets, Johnson & Johnson showed that they were not willing to take a risk with the public safety, even if it cost the company millions of dollars. The end result was the public viewing Tylenol as the unfortunate victim of a malicious crime. So, and this is, and by the way, this case study has shown to anybody in corporate communications who has to come up with some sort of message for what happens when a corporate disaster strikes. Your message is really simple. Number one, you describe the event. Here's what happened. Here is what we know. This is, you're in front of the media. The first thing, you don't dilly-dally. You get together. You quickly put together. Hopefully, your plan is defined ahead of time. But basically, what your plan should be is, we're going to get in front of the media. We're going to say, here's the event. Here's what happened. Here's what transpired. This is what we know. The truth. You're not going to sugarcoat it. This is what we know about the crime. By the way, Target did this. Describe your immediate response. What did you immediately do to address the issue? Again, you're trying to meet the concerns of your stakeholders, whether they're consumers, whether they're another company, whatever. You describe your long-term response. What else is going on or is going to happen? Maybe you're in Tylenol's case and Target's case, they said, we're working with the authorities, we're working with banks. And finally, and this is most important, particularly in that first message to the media, what are you doing for your affected customers? And this is every bit as part of a disaster recovery plan as what you're doing internally to fix the problem. You got to get out in front of it with the media. This should be part of your disaster recovery. The first message out there is, what are you doing and how is it going to affect your customers, and what are you doing about it to remediate the problem?
Yeah, and I think the instinct many times is that you want to immediately begin to unspool it and say, why did this happen, and do the root cause analysis of it. And there's a time and a place for that.
And or you want to downplay the problem, which is
right. You want to try to bury it.
You want to try to bury it. Yeah.
But ultimately, especially now. I mean, gosh, we're talking about the Tylenol case is over 30 years old now.
Right,
I mean,
82.
Yeah, 82. Yeah. But I mean, now it's even more with social media. I mean, you have to be out in front of this. But my point is that there'll be time to do root cause analysis, to gather everybody together and figure out why it happened and what you can do in the future to prevent that from happening. But the first thing is, tell your customers, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do right now. This is what we're doing and going to do right now immediately, before we even know necessarily why it happened or what. We're going to figure that out too. But right now, we're going to make you safe as we can. This is what we're going to do to make that happen. And again, as pointed out, this was millions and millions and millions of dollars for Tylenol.
Oh yeah, this was a huge hit.
This was a huge hit in the short term, and potentially, if they hadn't done it right, it was a hit of billions of dollars for J&J. I mean, it's Tylenol. I mean, it's one of the most trusted brands then and now. And the reason why it's still a trusted brand now is because they did it right then.
Because they did it right, because they handled the disaster properly. So that's what I'm saying. This is every bit of, if they had done everything that they did behind the scenes, but had not gotten out in front of the media with their message as part of their disaster recovery, they would probably not be in the position that they are now.
And I think that's a good point. I think it's a point that Paul raised and that you're hammering on here now too, is that I think a lot of organizations now in business continuity and disaster preparedness understand all the things about taking actions immediately and doing that. But the idea of communicating through the media to your public is one that people don't think about as much, and you probably should have that as a key part of your disaster preparedness. Is, okay, what's the message going to be? You can kind of fill in the blanks about X situation.
Yeah, you got to have a template ready.
Have a template ready about how you're going to deal with this right away, because that's really important to calm fears among your investors too, by the way. It's not just, I mean, investors, partners in your supply chain, your customers, everybody. I mean, you've got to do that and get out in front of it. And Tylenol is a great example of it, I think. Good stuff. Okay. All right, well, Paul Naismith, that was Paul's article, and Paul, of course, is one of our favorite contributors. Another one that I like a lot, we all like a lot here, is Jim Benson, and he's in the midst right now of the 6-part series appearing in Quality Digest Daily over the next several weeks, and first couple have already appeared. And these articles revolve around one of Jim's favorite tools, the Kanban board. Now, 2 of these articles ran earlier this week, and the first one was, Are You Just Doing Things? On Monday, and Categorizing Your Kanban Backlog, which appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. A couple of good pieces, and again, all these kind of go together and share a message. And the first of them, Are You Just Doing Things?, looked at how we manage the things that we have to do. As the title points out, the challenge is to make sure that we don't just kind of merrily roll along, putting tasks on our Kanban board and then knocking them off. The goal is to focus not just on the work that can be done, but on the stuff that needs to be done, the stuff that really moves the needle and creates improvement and efficiencies. The rub, of course, is that doing lots of things is often easy, but accomplishing a few things of real value is generally a lot harder. I fall into this. I'm going to raise my hand right now. I love taking things off the Kanban board or scratching things off of a list. I love completing things.
Because it feels good.
It feels good. It feels like I've made some progress. But, you know, it's easy to throw stuff up there and take it off. But when you think about it strategically, it's like, okay, but does that really contribute to a long-range strategic vision? And does it really contribute to improving whatever it is I want to improve? And not all the time. That really hit me. I'm like, gosh, that's a good point. It's, you know, think about why you're doing stuff, or if you're just doing stuff, what you can do to not do stuff, but to make things better, to make projects work better. That's the key thing. Getting back to this now, your Kanban board, if it is not filled with semi-meaningless tasks that exist only to be completed, can help you see what has to be done and offers a clear path to those meaningful accomplishments. And taking a step back, if you're not familiar with Kanban, it's essentially a scheduling system to permit organizational flow and just-in-time production. And it works pretty much equally well in manufacturing or service environments, like many elements of modern lean systems. The Kanban board was initially developed by Taiichi Ohno at Toyota about 70 years ago. And it's interesting how he developed it. He developed it by looking at supermarket chains and how supermarkets dealt with supplying and resupplying shelves and keeping them well stocked.
It's a pull system.
It's a pull system is what they call it, and it's really just in time. And Taiichi Ohno and the rest of the team at Toyota looked at that and said, well, how can this apply to a complicated manufacturing process? And they made it work, and out of that came the Toyota production system, and out of that came lean. And Jim Benson, of course, is a lean proponent. And getting back to Benson, in his second article, he delves into the difficulties with Kanban backlogs and what you can do about it. And in this article, he offers a couple of visual representations of Kanban boards. And I want to show them to you. The first one is a typically cluttered one. You can see it there. It's got, you can't really read it, but you can see to the left. Is that okay? The ready, I guess, to people that are watching at home, it's to your left.
That's just to be left, yeah.
All right. I'm like, is that reversed out? No. But you can see in the ready column, there's 24 little boxes there, all the different colors, under the ready column. So what that means is that those are ready to be worked on. Now, do you really think logically that any person is really ready to tackle any 24 tasks at any one time that are reportedly ready? I don't think so either. But so you can see how that's kind of the bad way to do it. In truth, what's going on here is that all that stuff is backlogged, and it needs to really be identified as such. In this case, they're not even prioritized or even necessarily linked to specific products. You can see them there. They're just thrown up there. Kanban is supposed to be a visual system, as we said, a pull system. But from looking at this, you really can't tell what's going on. Okay, well now let's look at the second Kanban board. And this one has a well-organized backlog, and it's listed as that. It's labeled as a backlog. Again, you can't quite see it, but to the left there, it's labeled as a backlog. And there's far fewer tasks in the ready, doing, and done columns. And they're all kind of color coordinated. You can see the four columns, the four rows are all color coordinated. And what it helps you do is it helps you understand that things that are labeled as ready, doing, and done are really ready, really doing, and really done. You know, that's the idea. The idea is that the Kanban board reflects the reality of your process. The point here is that Jim is making is that an orderly Kanban board, again, that reflects reality, is a much, much, much more effective tool to help you make decisions about the priorities of your work. Otherwise, you're stuck with a system that's really no better than random Post-it notes stuck on your computer monitor or to-do lists scratched on your desk blotter, and all that's just so 90s, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think so. And Dirk, you can talk to this. I mean, the QD editorial team has a Kanban board right there in our bullpen. Yep. And we've had it for a few years now, and we use it. And it's helped us, I think these articles have helped us look at our work organization a little bit more. Again, it's definitely helped me understand the need to prioritize work and to characterize work in process properly, work in progress, work in process. It's kind of whip for all of us, you know? Right. I mean, Our Kanban board is a work in progress.
Yeah, and we're constantly refining it.
Sure.
I mean, we get a lot of hints, in fact, from
Jim
like,
and
from
people,
Jim Benson and stuff on how to set this thing up and use it right. So.
And again, this is a multi-part series, so Jim's just getting into it. But look out for it over the next couple of weeks. We'll be rolling these out, and you'll be learning more about how you can improve your Kanban system.
That's right. Well, as we're getting to the end of the show here, we want to share with you this week's Tweet of the Week.
Tweet of the Week. We need theme music for this.
We need Tweet of the Week theme music.
Yeah.
This one is from Dave Goldberg. If we can pop that up there.
That's right.
There we go. What would engineering education be if it were reframed as a journey and not a destination? I love that one. And actually, I would say any kind of education.
Yes.
I think too much, one of the problems, and this is not a new thought, that education is something that you get done.
Yeah.
You know, it in itself is the end product, and it shouldn't be. And anytime we're learning, we should be taught as we're learning that learning is a lifelong thing, and this is just a small step in what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life.
You know, it strikes me that when you talk about that, what it's really analogous to is the journey towards certification, say for ISO 9001. You know, education, you could say, okay, I'm doing this to get a diploma, but are you doing it to get a diploma, or are you doing it because what you're going to learn, you're going to use? It's actually very similar to just, are you doing it just to get a cert on the wall, or are you doing it to improve your organization and learn about how your organization can get better?
And the problem, and boy, we could go on this forever, but the problem is that unfortunately that's how our educational system is set up. At least at the you know, K through 12, is kind of like it's all geared toward hitting these marks, getting your high school diploma, and then going to college.
Yeah, teach the test.
And it's less about, you know, how to synthesize data, how to take on this framework that you're being taught, or hopefully being taught, and so that you can do something with this for the rest of your life. I mean, it's something that I think is lacking, that's my own personal opinion, in our education system, is that it shouldn't be a destination, it should be a journey.
A journey, and for education, the journey is all about critical thinking. You want to develop critical thinking skills, because the world that kids right now who are in school or in grade school, the world they're going to be working in the 2020s and the 2030s and beyond, is going to be radically different than the one it is now. You can't necessarily give them tools to help them do better in that future world, but you can give them the one tool that counts, which is a critical thinking tool, to understand, to look at process and look beyond process, ask intelligent questions, and learn as you go, and make it that journey. So good stuff there from Dave Goldberg.
With those deep thoughts,
we'll
leave you.
That's right. That's right. That's our show for the week. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all of our contributors this week for some great stories. We'll be at you next week with another great week of QDD. And next week we have a good show. We have a good, really interesting QDL.
Oh, that is next week, isn't it?
Valentine's Day.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Robert Fangmeyer, director of the Baldrige program, and well, you caught me off guard with that. The CEO of Sutter Davis Hospital will be
Janet
Wagner.
Sorry. Thank you, Janet. Sorry.
Not up there. Robert Fangmeyer from the Baldrige program and Janet Wagner, CEO of Sutter Davis, will be on our show together next week for kind of an extended interview on Baldrige, kind of from both sides. So you want to tune in for that.
Make sure you check that one out next week, next Friday week from today. So thanks all for joining us. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.
So long.
Bye.